Man, it's been a little bit. That like intro sounded a bit like louder in my headphones like this time than previously, but it is what it is. All right, what's going on, y'all? It's been a couple of weeks. We've been on hiatus. Adam actually took a vacation, during these times. So glad you're able to get out and disconnect for a little bit. But it's time we get back to Dynasty content and Dynasty discussions, because it is the mailbag show here for the Dynasty League football content providers here over on YouTube Live. And I guess we don't really have any particular questions this week. I fell asleep at the wheel. That's on me. I didn't actually go out and actually ask some folks like for some specific questions, but there's enough larger topics going on around the league right now, not just within NFL, but within college, that we just felt that we could talk about just these certain situations that are going on right now, how they affect our dynasty strategies, and how you can incorporate them into your process for 2020. So with that being said, first and foremost, if you do have questions, since again I didn't go out and do that for this particular show,
these are my questions.
Yes, drop us a line at the link you see below us. Contact us over at DLF. Folks like Matt Price, the zookeeper himself, he's been actually manning some of the questions that folks have been sending in. So that is actually an article that he puts up over on the website. Definitely go ahead and check that out. One of the sharpest dudes out there when it comes to strategy. So if you get a chance, please go ahead and get those questions over to him, and we'll field some of those questions here. He also put some up on the site for y'all to read if you get a chance to do that. But otherwise, I mean, if you want some of our insights into it, I mean, obviously take a look at our Twitter handles, drop us a line there. We've been getting a couple of those questions here and there, but we appreciate any of those interactions that we can get with y'all. Absolutely, we'll take care of that when we can. But all right, so let's get into it. We've had over the past week or so a lot of discussion about college football. A lot of not a lot, but I guess a lot of schools and a few conferences have now already opted to postpone their season for fall of 2020 due to the pandemic. And it's put a lot of, I guess, the careers and the, I guess, prospect and how some of these players are going to get into the NFL. It's put a lot of uncertainty on how the draft in 2021 is going to take place, because now the tape and the data for a lot of these players is going to be limited. They've only going to have like maybe a couple of seasons of information that we'll have on them before we wind up drafting them in about 7-ish months or so, 7-8 months from now. So with that being said, I mean, what are we doing with those? I mean, those super valuable 2021 first round picks. I mean, how should we approach that? And so, Adam, I mean, with your, I guess, what is your take on the uncertainty that it's now going to be the 2021 season?
All right, well, we can look at this a couple of ways. The first way is that NFL owners already make mistakes. So the problem with our uncertainty with drafts is that we believe that there will be uncertainty with the real draft. And I get that, because some of these players aren't going to be seen. Rondell Moore won't be seen. Shad Bateman won't be seen. Lance and Justin Fields will not be seen. So those are 4 big names that we would see early in the NFL draft. We would see early in our rookie drafts that we won't see this year. It doesn't necessarily mean that their stock's going to drop. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go up. We will still see Trevor Lawrence, which, like I said earlier, was weird to me. The 2 other big names at quarterback aren't playing, so I would think that he would sit out as well, because they were his only competition for 1 overall. But everyone reacts differently. I personally know that my brother's dad has played golf with him during the pandemic, so he doesn't seem to be too terribly worried. Yeah. So he's probably just going to go out and play some football. So for us, teams miss every year, honestly. So there might miss a little bit more this year, but we've seen enough of some of these guys. We've seen enough of Trevor Lawrence for him to go 1 overall. That's why I said that we don't even need to see him this year. So I would not sell my picks at a discount. That's 100% fact. If you hold your pick till the clock, like every year for the last 10 years I've been doing it, your pick is most valuable when you're on the clock. Hold your pick to the clock, and if you're uncomfortable making it, then you can sell your pick. So that's one option. Hold your pick until you're on the clock. You're uncomfortable. You don't think that NFL teams were able to do their due diligence to make accurate draft picks. Maybe you think that a player got picked way too late, they got picked way too early, it's just fishy, it doesn't complete their draft profile. You just want to secure the bag for your pick. Fine, wait till you're on the clock to do it. That's one route to take. Another route to take is something that I did personally. I drafted towards the beginning of COVID-19, and there was a lot more uncertainty then, in my opinion, because we had no idea what was going on. I traded into this year's class. I actually sent my 2021 first on a contending team for the 201, and I drafted Henry Ruggs because he's a prospect that I've said many times on this show I believe will produce this year. And if he doesn't produce this year, I believe he wasn't going to hit anyways. So I decided to take my pick. And honestly, there's probably a few players that are worth 2021 firsts that are in the second this year. That's Higgins, that's Mims, Pittman, now probably Gibson, and Ruggs. So that's another way to take your 2021 first that you've got some uncertainty around, and just go ahead and, we got the whole 2020 season. We got the 2020 draft. We've got complete draft profiles on these players. Maybe you go ahead and you trade into this year's class. And just because your drafts are over doesn't mean that's too late. If you want to take your 2021 first and offer it for one of those guys, even all 5 of them, I don't mind doing that either. I probably would not. I definitely would not send a 2021 first for Higgins, Mims, or Gibson personally.
Not just straight up, right?
Not straight up.
Yeah.
I've got an affinity for Pittman and Ruggs. I did for Ruggs, but I think that you could probably ask for a little bit more if you're
Pittman and Ruggs, but not T. I mean, Russ is going to come after you for that, man.
No, I've said so many times I like T. Higgins bunny, but I'll do my T. Higgins buy-in next year.
Got you. Now given the Cincinnati situation, I think that kind of makes sense. And just to hammer that point home about, I guess, how much like the schools and the conference's decisions have affected even just our rankings here at DLF. I wanted to pull up what our Devi rankers over at DLF have kind of put together over the last few months, and they've tweaked some of their rankings. And I mean, just looking at the top 5, this is top 5 overall. I mean, you can see now some of the pitfalls or like the holes that have now come into play because of the fact that these schools have opted out. I mean, so now our number 2 player gone, number 4 player gone. And now we have, again, in the top 5 spots, we've got 2 of those players that have now, opted out of the upcoming season. So that's less information we're going to have available to us. I mean, I think with both of those guys, they're probably secure in their place within their position anyway, that it won't necessarily affect their draft stock. Just relative to the other players, but still, it would have been nice to have another season of them so they can show out and let us know what they've got. And then also at the quarterback position, as Adam already pointed out, we still got Trevor Lawrence up at the top, but Ohio State out, North Dakota State also out. Of course, and from at least me looking into at least the college football around, I haven't heard much about any of the rest of the guys like here on this list. But again, if you're of the top 3 quarterbacks, 2 are already out for the season, it's not looking all too great in terms of draft prospects for 2021. So if you look at this situation and say that a number of your prospects are now going to be out for the season, it's going to cause a ton of uncertainty. We don't even know if spring football is going to be a thing, how that's going to, work in tandem with the NFL schedule, because we got the combine in like the early spring-ish time frame and the draft almost immediately after that. How all that's going to play out, how that's going to affect teams and how they approach the 2021 draft, it's all up in the air at this point. So if your stance is that you want to move out of this particular class and you want to try and sell your 2021 draft pick, I think still the process remains that waiting until that point, like when your draft is going to happen. So if you want to wait until April, if you want to wait until your rookie draft occurs in May or whenever whatever the case is for your league, that's still the best. To me, that's still the best process because it harvests the most value out of those 2021 picks. Because at least at that time, so what we're talking, 7 months down the road, at least then we'll have much more information on the class and the players associated with it and their situations than we do right now. And looking at, and also using one of DLF's tools, the Trade Finder, looking at what you can get for 2021 draft picks, again, they might be fair deals as of what's today, August 13th. But do they, I mean, but do they really wow you, like looking at some of these picks? I mean, these are more package deals. So the 2021 with Akers, Lazard, and Oliver for like Zach Moss, Mike Williams, Noah Fant, fair deal, absolutely. But does it really, I guess, like hammer home the value of that 2021 pick? I'm not particularly seeing it. There was another one that I saw that was down here. Was it 2021 first round pick for Preston Williamson and 2021 second? Okay. Let's see, Antonio Gibson and a 2021 third for BC Johnson and 2021 first. To me, that looks like the Antonio Gibson owner, like he got out on, like he cashed in on the Antonio Gibson hype. Totally understand that. Not mad at that at all. Let's see, from a wide receiver perspective, Deontay Johnson in 2021 first for Cooper Kupp. I'm not particularly excited about that given Kupp's situation. But again, it's one of those things where you kind of have to play the market for what it is. As of right now, I'm not seeing a ton that leads me to wanting to quickly move out of this class and get some value that I would want to invest in or value that I want to have on my team. So
Right.
it's a difficult situation. I can totally understand why folks would want to feel uncertain about the incoming class. But again, the way that the market is viewing those picks, it's not like you're going to be getting a ton back, or at least what you would expect given the value of some of those, like your first round picks beforehand. Because what in 2020 first round picks would net you what? Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, I mean, Jerry Jeudy, Siegley, I mean, all these other like big name players, and especially now since we know their situation, that might have some hindsight bias in it. But there was some inherent value in those prospects. And while this class isn't as, I guess, aligned with as many star-studded prospects, there still should be some more value attached to those first-round picks. So that, to me, I would think that folks would probably want to hold on to those as long as possible before trying to run and, I guess, get a veteran, maybe even push or like punt to the 2022 season if you want to try and wait this whole thing out. It just seems like it's a bit too early for you to try and move out of the 2021 class, at least at this point.
Yeah, in 2020, we hyped up for so long that those picks got extreme value. I mean, CD Lamb was at 106, and he could have been 101 in a lot of other classes. So those running backs. So you're definitely not going to get what you were expecting of 2020. I'm thinking that the market's going to be down on 2021 picks because the obvious thing is what always affects the market. And if the obvious thing is that we're not trusting these NFL teams to make proper evaluations, how are we going to make proper evaluations? Granted, I think our community makes better evaluations than the NFL a lot of times anyways, but these are the professionals, and if they can't make full profiles on these players, it's going to be tough for us too. So I think that the 2021 picks aren't going to be super valuable anyways. And the first thing anyone says when you trade a pick just for a player is that you could have got a better player because it's a 1-for-1 deal, and the value of the 2021 first is up in the air. It can fluctuate, but you just showed you're not netting what you think you would like to get for a first round pick. So it's really up to you. I put it on the fact that I think that 15 players are first round players this year. So I jumped into this season and said, the hell with my pick next year in one league. Others I'm going to hold and probably sell right at draft time just because, and it depends. I mean, we might be able to get full profiles on players just based on what we've seen of them so far. I mean, Ronell Moore is already amazing. Bateman's already amazing. We're going to miss those two, but granted, they're not sitting on their butts for a year. They're going to make themselves better over that period of time. Who's to say that, being a part of their football teams meant that's the only way they could get better? They more specifically would like to put on weight and maintain his speed. He's going to get the opportunity to do that now without having to worry about game day. So might end up being more of a freak than he already is by the time draft time comes around. And then I want to take more, perhaps 101. I don't want to trade my pick. So maybe you wait for that. You don't necessarily want to jump to the assumption that these players are going to get worse over this year, especially the quarterbacks. I mean, they might be working out with a quarterback coach for the next year and be NFL ready when they might not have been. Trey Lance specifically, I wouldn't have picked. He would have been more like I wish he would sit for a year like Patrick Mahomes did. But he's got a year to get NFL ready now. So let's not just assume that it's going to be the worst thing. The market will assume that, which is why I say, okay, if you're not going to jump into this year like I did, hold your picks until we figure some things out.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a ton of different ways you could pick apart, or like and a number of narratives that are probably going to come out of players like opting out for the season. So again, if your stance is that you're going to be uncertain about the way things are playing out, at the very least, I think you should wait and collect as much information so you have more certainty. And that, again, that would then affect how much you value those picks, and then also at least help you in your negotiation for some of those picks so that you can harvest as much value out of them. So that's our take. I mean, of course, we always want to know what y'all think. I mean, if you can get more for your 2021 pick, like right now, or if you've executed a trade, like where you've been able to get, I think I've seen a couple of folks, especially shortly after the Damian Williams like opt-out news. I think I saw one trade on the Trade Finder. It was like CEH for J.K. Dobbins in a 2021 first, like something wild like along those lines. Yeah. But I mean, something along those lines. If you've done something like that, I mean, definitely hit us up and let us know. Or even if you have a different, I guess, philosophical view on how to approach the 2021 season, because I mean, the people that play Devy probably have the largest leg up on the field at this point, because since we don't have this upcoming season to really see them play, to see their highlights, to even see their lowlights and like how they're used on the field. I mean, those Devy guys that have been following, tracking some of these guys for the past couple of years, they'll have the most information. So this is where, I mean, folks that have done some of the rankings, like here for DLF, other folks that are like, I mean, super into Devy, they might be the resource that you need in order to, I guess, better understand how those players, like where they win, how they can be used, and what offenses best suit their capabilities. So I would highly encourage folks to go out and try and start looking into that Devy content now.
And you mentioned philosophically, I think we're making a bold assumption and even saying that the players that don't get to play are going to be any worse off, because we need to remind ourselves as well, college football doesn't have the same resources that the NFL has. So they don't get to just completely up their, not every college, the big Alabamas and stuff, they might be able to do this, but the tours around the facilities in the NFL, and they've tried to dot every T and every I. I personally don't believe any league will succeed outside of a bubble. So if I don't think the NFL can do it with every resource in the whole planet without a bubble, college football doesn't seem to be doing too terribly much themselves, or maybe they don't even have the resources for some of those teams like North Dakota, who's not playing, or something like that. They might not have the resources to try to keep these players safe. Does it help that Bateman, is already getting in NFL form while his teammates have to scramble through playing 3 games? It probably does in hindsight when we get down to it. So we'll see. All right, so we lost Chris for a second. So let me get back to talking about our next topic a little bit. So going into the season with all the uncertainty that we were just discussing here, we've got a few things to consider as well. So running back handcuffs is one of those things that I've been considering recently. I'm not a big proponent of handcuffing, and I haven't been in the past. What I will say is that we have the opportunity to look forward to this season and say there's some clarity on what's going to happen to players that get COVID. It's going to be 3 weeks of quarantine for these players. That's 3 weeks for an opportunity for these handcuffs behind them to get some playing time. Now, I don't think that I'll go out and actually buy, handcuffs that aren't going to do anything anyways, because when I'm investing in handcuffs, I want somebody that already has a role, right? So somebody like Darrington Evans might have a role already, because we don't historically see Derrick Henry catch a lot of passes, right? So I'm going to go down the list just for a second and talk about the big running backs, the running backs that we consider to be, workhorses. And who's behind them that we know for a fact is going to get the bulk of the load when those running backs go down. Should they get injured, right? Because that's always a concern. Or should they catch COVID, unfortunately? So we have some running backs like Christian McCaffrey, where, yes, Christian McCaffrey is going to get 100 catches and a ton of carries, right? But if he goes down, are we going to see a lot of Jordan Leggett? No, probably not. We'll see more Curtis Samuel. We'll see more of a pass-first offense, things like that. It's more like your Alvin Kamara. Okay, Latavius Murray behind Alvin Kamara. We saw in DFS last year, he was just a lock button, right? Alvin Kamara went down. Latavius Murray was in your lineup every time. And he did spectacular, right? Latavius Murray is somebody that you could go out and acquire for a third, maybe a fourth, because he doesn't hold a lot of dynasty value besides if Alvin Kamara gets hurt, right? But he's going to belong to an incredibly valuable offense should Alvin Kamara get hurt or unfortunately contract COVID, right? There's other guys like Zeke. Okay, so Tony Pollard would be an excellent example of this, except for Zeke has already had the coronavirus. So, I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you if it's possible to get it again or not, but probably unlikely that, Ezekiel Elliott ends up contracting COVID again. Probably not a running back that I'm going to target specifically with the chance of that player, contracting COVID. Dalvin Cook is an excellent example. Alexander Mattison is already a valuable target because Dalvin Cook did not get a contract. Dalvin Cook might not get a contract, and that means that he's a free agent next year. So if that happens, Alexander Mattison is, a valuable handcuff, probably has a role anyways, and could perhaps be the starting running back of a run-first offense next year. It probably doesn't get done for a third because a lot of people know this, but he's probably worth the second that you have to spend on him or the second-round caliber player. Maybe you're Preston Williams, someone like that. Probably worth flipping, and there's 3 avenues right there for Alexander Mattison to get significant playing time. Another player that I like is Boston Scott. Boston Scott could be had incredibly cheap behind Miles Sanders. He probably has a role anyways, again. He probably is going to be a featured workhorse should Miles Sanders get hurt or contract COVID again, and part of an offense that we believe will be productive in 2021. I apologize. So just going down the list here, that's the guys that I kept in mind. You get into a range where it's like, do I want to invest in Kerryon Johnson? Yeah, because DeAndre Swift, if he goes down or contracts COVID, then Kerryon Johnson is going to be, carrying the full load. But he carried the full load last year, and it wasn't entirely productive. So it's not necessarily true that I want to target those players. Aaron Jones, if A.J. Dillon is the backup, we don't even know that yet with Jamal Williams still there. So I'm already investing in A.J. Dillon. I like A.J. Dillon personally, so I've already been drafting him. Do I specifically go out and target him as Aaron Jones handcuff, as a potential value bump if Aaron Jones were to contract COVID? No, not necessarily. So you need to ask yourself when you're acquiring these players, am I willing to pay a little bit extra for this handcuff because somebody else is going to obviously be smart and valuable in 2021? We get that. So I'm not paying extra for A.J. Dillon because of that, because I don't know. Kenyon Drake is a good example, Chase Edmonds, because Kenyon Drake might move on next year, right? So you have the chance of Kenyon Drake getting hurt, contracting COVID, and Chase Edmonds gets to step up in a very productive offense. Very, very cheap. Chase Edmonds is an excellent buy. These are just questions that you're going to have to ask yourself. How can you leverage a really bad situation, frankly, for everybody, and a really weird season in Dynasty football? These are some ways you can leverage it. Now, I didn't do this with wide receiver today. I didn't prepare a list for that because it's just really hard to predict how offenses are going to change with wide receiver. We really want to look for offenses that have running backs that are considered workhorses, 65, 70% of the touches, even 60, and say, do I have a clear-cut backup? Like Damian Williams, he opted out of the season. We don't know necessarily exactly who's going to be behind CEH, so it's going to be tough to target. You don't want to even waste a third on a Dwayne Washington if you don't even know if it's going to be Darwin Thompson, So we're not going to spend thirds on players like that, but Joe Mixon's another example. You don't necessarily know if it's going to be Rodney Anderson behind him, if we're going to see all the Giovanni Bernard in the world. Nick Chubb's a tough example because that would be excellent, except for Kareem Hunt's so expensive anyways, right? So you don't want to go out and get Kareem Hunt. But go through the list. I literally just pulled up ADP with dynastyleaguefootball.com. Check out players that you know right now that are valued highly. So I'm looking at a top 10, top 15 list right now. And just ask yourself, if this player goes down, if this player contracts COVID, who's going to get a value bump? Who's going to win me weeks for very cheap? But does that player have a future in the NFL that I can invest, say, a third in, third round value player, maybe a second round value player, something like that, because you don't want to waste on an asset that's descending anyways. You want to have, with Alexander Mattison, we had 3 to 4 outs where Alexander Mattison increases value. Yes, I have to spend a little bit extra because people are smart and people do know this, but I'm giving myself 3 to 4 opportunities to where Alexander Mattison nets me a profit or, frankly, wins me weeks. So that's my take on that. We didn't get Chris's, a little bit of a weird episode because Chris got dropped off, but I hope that we found you some valuable information there. And most importantly, we just made you think, because there are going to be plenty of ways to leverage the field. And, Dynasty isn't all too different from DFS, where if you're not leveraging the field, you can't build a monster roster. And to build a monster roster, you need to make profits, right? So here's ways that you can pick up players and flip them. And another thing that I wanted to mention before I get out of here is that the handcuff does not always have to be yours. Actually, to be most valuable, the handcuff would not be yours, because you're losing a player, adding a player that's supposed to fill in for your player. So you actually had to take 2 roster spots to own, one chunk of value, right? You actually want other people's handcuffs. You want the Derrick Henry owners, Darrington Evans. You want the Dalvin Cook owners, Alexander Mattison. It's nice to have your handcuff, but don't pay extra for your handcuff because it doesn't necessarily increase value, and it holds 2 roster spots on your roster. So just things to consider. Tough year for everybody. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I appreciate you guys sticking with us, and I hope everybody stay safe. Have a good one.